Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight. Please have a seat, relax. So, what do you all know about ghosts? Oh, I bet you're all thinking about poltergeists. Those spirits who throw your pots and pans around the kitchen and sometimes toss a grandmother down the stairs. But not all ghosts are like that. So make sure to never judge a tombstone by its cover. A few years ago, I was often found with friends exploring old, supposedly haunted places. One day we found ourselves at the Edisto First Presbyterian Church, where a girl named Julia Legare had been buried in her family mausoleum in 1852, presumably dying of diphtheria. Passerby reported hearing screams coming from the graveyard during the next week, but never investigated the cause of it. 15 years later, when they opened the mausoleum to inter the next family member who had died, they found her skeleton huddled in the corner beside the door. Streaks of dried blood remained as a monument to her fierce struggle to escape fate. Well, when we got there, my friends thought it would be a funny idea to shut the heavy stone door of the mausoleum behind me and leave me overnight. I was stranded, unable to move the stone slab without help. For what seemed like an eternity, I struggled in vain, just as Julia once had. Eventually, in the complete darkness, I had no choice but to resign myself to the night ahead of me. I've never been claustrophobic, but the stale air held pressure that made breathing hard. It felt like an overwhelming sadness was literally pushing down on my shoulders. As time slowly slipped by, my initial anger faded into a sense of fear and eventually despair. Sometime later, the scratches began. They were faint at first. I was sure it was my imagination, but they seemed to become louder, clearer as time passed, more frantic. There was no doubt that something was trying to get through the door, or trying to get out. I huddled into one of the corners furthest from it and covered my ears, but nothing could drown out the sounds. They only lasted for a few minutes, but each second was an unbearable eternity. I grew so distraught that I finally screamed, or I thought I did, until I realized that the voice was not my own. It echoed through the dark, tiny confines of the mausoleum. It was a wail of unrestrained pain and absolute overwhelming fear. Moments later, I realized that the scratching had stopped. For the first time, I could distinctly make out the sound of a young girl sobbing, the pitiful, choking gasps of someone without a shred of hope left to them. I felt such sorrow at that moment, such pain, that I think I forgot how to be afraid. In my heart, all her suffering seemed to resonate. The invisible weight of sadness I had felt all along became crushing. Tears filled my eyes as I shook, my entire being racked with grief. Inexplicably, I even found myself apologizing aloud for what had happened to her between ragged breaths. Some part of me was so wrought with pity that I wanted to reach out and hold this girl in the darkness. It was a part held back only by the fear that something might truly be there to hold. I can't say if she heard me or was even aware of my presence. The sobbing never stopped, and the scratching at the door soon started anew. At some point, I must have passed out from hyperventilation. When I awoke, it was the sound of the stone slab as it fell away from the doorway and landed on the ground with a thud. Even the pale gray morning light was blinding after the absolute darkness. Thinking my friends had come back, I rushed out into the foggy day and sucked in a mouthful of fresh air. I was shocked to find nobody around, but more eager to be away from that place. I stumbled around to the front of the church and entered a small, unlocked prayer house. I think previously it was a segregated mini-church for slaves, but regardless, I collapsed against the door and waited, distraught, till my friends finally arrived. I approached them as they clustered around the fallen door. Two of them were kneeling next to it with faces of shock. I was sure they must have been wondering how I could have moved it by myself. I was wrong. In the growing light, it was clear. There were dried, bloody streaks covering the interior of the door. Some had light scratches where nails had grated across the surface. Many more were smooth, as if left by bloody nubs. When they noticed me, they all jumped. I saw the fear in their eyes. My anger must have been clear. They looked down at my hands, thinking I had torn them open in my escape, then shared a horrified look amongst themselves. They asked what had happened, and I told them every detail of what I remembered in halting, angry, and equally horrified parts, wanting them to know all that I had been put through. Finally, after I grudgingly got into the car and we started to head back, someone spoke up. My friend said to me, "We were afraid to say anything until you were back inside the car, but take a look at your face." When I reached from the back seat and adjusted the rear view mirror, I saw that there was blood caked across my face. Just like the streaks upon the stone slab, there were dark red lines on each side, as if someone had run their torn fingers across it while I slept. Feeling the warmth of another for the first time in over 100 years. A tragic tale, to be sure, but there's a silver lining. At least she got them both out, and that does count for something. But if I were in this person's shoes, I'd be planning on teaching my so-called friends a little lesson later. Well, that's all for tonight. If you enjoyed the story, please remember to feed the algorithm monster by liking and subscribing. Thank you all very much, and goodbye.